Welcome, everyone, to a brand new episode of the Cover 2 podcast. It's a podcast Monday. I am Jared Smith.
And I am Nenad, the brother of wide receiving star at Yale, Chase Nenad.
That's right. I know Nick's been tweeting all week. What do you have? I know we have one touchdown. He had like 3 long grabs. I mean, the dude was looking NFL ready already. So NFL scouts, Yale football, that's where it's at. So shout out to Yale. I know Nick's going to be there later in the season when they play Harvard, but Yale is legit. They got some real dudes out there. So shout out to him. You were sending me those videos. That was pretty dang cool. A little later in the show, we're going to get to college football. The first college football playoff rankings come out tomorrow, Nick. And you and I, the past couple of weeks, have done a top 15 of our own. This week, we have a top 10, right?
Yeah.
The field is narrowing down. It's getting smaller and smaller. So we've got a top 10 list each of us do for you guys.
Let's move to college football. College football playoff is released tonight, tomorrow. If you're watching this Monday night, it's tonight, right? And so you're seeing our top 10 before those schmucks in the South and the Pac-12 and the Big 10 and the Big 12 and the ACC give off their biased opinions and their SEC heavy rankings. Nah, Jared Smith and I have the top 10 you want to see, so you can agree or disagree with us, right? We're not 26. We do our research. I've watched all these games this year, okay? Except for last week. There was a lot of blowouts. Didn't need to watch a lot of them back. But Jared, let's get into it. Top 10 in college football. And after we do our top 10, we're going to kind of describe to you why, even though this is the first week of the college football playoff rankings, there's still so many big-time matchups that most likely will have ramifications for the college football playoff that, some of these rankings don't matter at all. Or they matter because if a team loses, this is where they are right now. And this is how we see them. If they lose to a top 5 team, that's the way it goes. But before we get into the top 5, let's go to our top 10. I'm going to pull up my top 10 here. And usually I do my top 15, so I actually list off 16 teams. But Jared Smith, I'll give you the honors. You can go first this week. Give me your 10 through 6, and then I'll give you my 10 through 6, and then we'll debate each other on it if we disagree so much.
The real 10 through 6. And just for those that don't know, I let Nick Nenad do his own top 15 for a couple weeks, and it was so blasphemous, and I was so damn tired of hearing this shit that I had to now come on and give you a legitimate top 10 so that you guys could actually see what a real list looked like. So we've inched closer and closer in the last few weeks, and hopefully we can get on the same page, because we don't talk about these. We do our own separate research. We don't talk about this beforehand. So he doesn't know what I have. I don't know what he has. So hopefully, Nick, you have, gotten smarter and smarter, and your list will look just like mine. Let's start off 10 through 6. Number 10, I have the USC Trojans. Now, here's why I have them at number 10. They're 7-1 currently, sitting in their rankings. And I think they're at number 10 because of their potential. I think when you look at them on paper, when you look at Lincoln Riley, when you look at Caleb Williams, when you look at the receiving core that they have, they can probably score and put up points with any other team in the country. There are a couple problems with them, though. They have only played one ranked team, and that was Utah, and they lost by 1. Albeit it was a very close game. They didn't get blown out. It was at Utah, so I have to give them a little bit of leeway. But your schedule has been pretty cupcake other than that. You also play in the Pac-12, which Pac-12, even though there are some good teams in there, and I'm going to get to that in a minute, the Pac-12 is not the SEC. The Pac-12 is not the Big Ten, right? So that plays to their disadvantage. And the other part is their defense. They can give up points. Now, we've seen Lincoln Riley teams in the past with Oklahoma kind of do the same thing. They can score a lot of points, but they also give up points. Coming into USC, even though he still has not had time to really recruit his guys, the defense is somewhat of a problem. And I don't necessarily sit here and trust that USC's defense can kind of lead them and guide them. They're going to really have to rely on Caleb Williams, which I'm sure they could when you're going up against Ohio State or an Alabama or a Tennessee. I'm not betting on USC. So they're number 10 because of their potential, but I think they have too many holes to be in the college football playoff. Number 9, UCLA. Now, I have them ahead of USC, and I don't necessarily like this. I'm obviously more of a USC fan than UCLA. Nick, on the other hand, is the UCLA guy, so you're welcome for putting your Bruins ahead. But the only reason why UCLA is ahead is because they have played and beaten 2 ranked teams at the time in number 15 Washington and number 11 Utah. Their quarterback, DTR, and Charbonnet, their running back, are unreal. That quarterback and running back combo, what they can do together is scary. And I think that does scare teams. They're 13th in rushing in all of college football. But it's going to come down to the USC game at the end of the year. That for both of these teams, right? Not just the Rose Bowl, but having any type of chance of making the college football playoff, you're going to have to win and win considerably against each other. So if UCLA beats the brakes off USC, I think that could potentially catapult them. If it's USC beating the brakes off of UCLA, that could potentially catapult them. But that game is going to be circled on the calendar as the game that can potentially get one of these 2 teams in. It's going to knock the other team out. Number 8, I have Oregon. So I have 3 straight Pac-12 teams. Oregon is ahead of UCLA and USC because Oregon's beat number 12 BYU at the time, and then they beat UCLA pretty handily. Like, they made UCLA, even though they scored 30, it was not a good game for them. So Bo Nix is living up to the hype, obviously coming from Auburn, where he disappointed greatly, and now he looks like a rejuvenated Bo Nix. They're 9th in rushing, and they're 8th in points per game. So they score 42 points a game. They can put up points. They obviously had that week 1 loss to Georgia, but since then they have looked pretty dang good. So they deserve to be at number 8. Number 7, Alabama. I can't tell right now. Nick's not really saying too much, so I don't know if he's agreeing with me or disagreeing with me. I think he's purposely trying to keep his cool, keep a poker face, because I think in reality he's agreeing with what I'm saying here. But I have Alabama at number 7. Obviously, their only loss was to Tennessee in one of the craziest games that we've seen in a long time, on that last-second field goal by Tennessee. They have a chance to get back in the top 4 if they beat number 15 LSU, and then if they beat number 11 currently Ole Miss. Both those games are on the road, right? So I think winning on the road in the SEC even means more. The fact that both of those teams are ranked. But if Alabama can beat both of those teams, I think they would then have a legitimate case to get back in. They still have Bryce Young. I think he is, with CJ Stroud, 1A, 1B. You can flip them however you want. The 2 best quarterbacks in the nation. As long as Bryce Young is healthy, I think Alabama has a chance. And number 6, I have TCU. Undefeated, 8-0. The reason I have them ahead of Alabama, they're undefeated, number 1. Number 2, they had 4 straight wins against ranked opponents, which, yes, that may not be SEC opponents, but that's Big 12, still good opponents, right? Their lowest scoring game of the season was 38 points. They've done that 3 times, which means they have scored at least 38 points in every single game. They're 5th in scoring with 44.3 points per game. And coming up, I don't think it's this week, but I think in 2 weeks, they go to Texas. Even though Texas isn't ranked, we saw that Texas almost beat Alabama. So we know what they can be with Quinn Ewers. So if they beat Texas, I would seriously have to consider them putting them in the college football playoff. But those are my 10 through 6: USC, UCLA, Oregon, Alabama, and TCU.
Okay. Let's go through my 10 through 6. So, Jared, I completely agree with you. Number 10 and number 9 are the same for me, USC and UCLA. My main thing was both teams had a big road loss. UCLA's loss was a little bit worse. Like I kind of talked about 2 weeks ago, Utah beating USC, a lot of shystiness in that game, some bad refereeing. They lost Jordan Addison. Utah goes for 2. It's really the only reason they win. So kind of a half loss there for USC, but you mentioned it. They haven't beaten anybody good. And UCLA has that dominant win against Utah, albeit at home, at night in California, right? It's not, in the cold, in the altitude in Utah, but they beat them by 3 possessions. Okay. And to be honest, the only team they haven't beat by about 3 possessions, the only 2 teams are Oregon, who they lost to, and South Alabama, which is hilarious. But so I had to put UCLA above that. And even when you look at UCLA's other games, like I mentioned, South Alabama's not a bad team. They're 6-2. Their only losses are to UCLA and Troy. Troy is a 6-2 team as well. So they're not a bad team. Yes, UCLA should have beat them by a lot more. I understand. But it was 110 degrees. It was an 11 a.m. start for a Pacific time zone team. Brutal. Okay. And so I'm just saying there was a lot of factors. And the same with USC. Go to Utah, elements, altitude. It's tough, right? Also, the other biggest win for USC was a 3-point win where they scored 17 points against Oregon State, who I think is a little overrated than they are in the AP poll right now. And really nobody else. This is where we disagree. Number 8, I have Alabama. Okay? And let me explain. I get that they've lost to one of the best teams in college football, because I'm not going to give away my top 5, in Tennessee. They have a win versus Texas A&M that they could have lost if Texas A&M threw the ball into the end zone on the very last play of the game. They should have lost to Texas if Quinn Ewers plays the rest of that game. And their wins against Mississippi State and Arkansas don't look as good. When you look at Oregon, yes, they got blown the fuck out on opening day. It was a road game. Same with Tennessee, right? Tennessee and Alabama. They did beat up on BYU, which they should have, right? They had a nice road win at Washington State. And their big win against, I think UCLA is a legitimate top 10 team as of right now. So Alabama has not beaten anybody that good this year. Really that good. Now, they, like you mentioned, Jerry, this is what I'm talking about with these rankings. If they go in and beat LSU on the road and they go in and beat Ole Miss, yes, Alabama will 100% start moving up in the rankings as long as a lot of these other teams don't stay undefeated. But for right now, based on what has happened, Alabama could easily be a 2-loss team. So I cannot put them in front of a 1-loss team that's had a difficult schedule and has a big win on there's some merit into putting UCLA above Alabama. But right now, I can't do that. I think right now, if Alabama played UCLA, a lot of people would favor Alabama. And I would too. Number 6, undefeated Clemson Tigers. I've moved them down. They were a top 3 team for me. They were number 2 at one point. But a lot of their wins don't look as good anymore. And that matters here, okay? Their win against Florida's a 4-4 team. Okay? Not that big of a deal. Excuse me. I was looking at Georgia. Clemson, they have a win against Syracuse. Okay? Syracuse had an easy schedule. It's the reason they never made my top 15. Okay? They weren't a top 15 team. They never were there, and they're never gonna be there. Okay. They also had trouble. They had a backup come in and win the game for them. I think that's relatively impressive, but it's a weird win, right? You bench your 5-star quarterback and you put in another guy and he wins the game for you. Weird, right? Their win against NC State still does count, because remember, Devin Leary is hurt for the rest of the year. So if NC State ends up being 8-4, they probably were like a 10-2 team this year if they keep the quarterback. But NC State, they had a good win this week. That's still a good win. But Wake Forest lost, and Wake Forest could easily have 3 losses. I've explained that Wake Forest, they beat Liberty in OT by going for 2. Now, Liberty's a good team. They're actually ranked in the top 25 in the AP poll. But Wake Forest then got murdered by Louisville last weekend. Don't know what happened. Weird. And their other losses to Clemson. For me, I had Clemson at number 6 behind the rest of the top 5 undefeated teams, but I just think they're that worse. They're the worst undefeated team in college football right now.
Yeah. I honestly, I was back and forth between. Well, I'm just going to give it away. We just need to move into our top 5 to 1. But sure. I was on the verge of putting TCU at 5 and Clemson at 6. So I'm giving away that I have Clemson at 5, but I don't know why. I really don't know why I put Clemson at 5, because when I look at even my notes that I have for TCU, I probably should have put them at 5, seeing as they beat 4 straight ranked opponents. And I even said it last week, and I still don't fully trust Clemson. Like, their quarterback was benched at one point during the season, right? Like, now he's still their starter, but they just don't seem, they're just not the same Clemson team that we've known for the last 4 or 5 years with Dabo Swinney. So I honestly think that Clemson would have a hard time, a really tough time against anyone in the top 4, and even the likes of a TCU or an Alabama, right? So yeah. But no, I respect your list. I think there's obviously arguments to be made for all those, and I'm not going to bash. This might be the first week that I'm not bashing your list. Your list is admirable. It's very nice, and I'm even going to give you credit, because now that I think about it even more, I'm actually going to switch TCU and Clemson. So I'm going to put Clemson at 6, and I'm going to bump up TCU to 5, and I'll give you the credit for that, sir.
Jared, do you want to disagree though? You want to disagree, because you're going to disagree with my top 5, 100%.
Oh boy.
Okay.
All right.
So I'll get to it.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll get to it. So you've given away that you have TCU at number 5 at this point. Okay.
Yeah.
And Clemson number 6. Now, fair. Been pretty close. Okay. I have a different number 5 team. It's a team that has been around number 5 the whole season, because when you look at what they've done, it's not that impressive. Okay. So number 5 in my college football rankings are the defending champion Georgia Bulldogs. And let me explain. Georgia, again, I'll give them credit. There's been some stuff on their schedule that looks better now, and there's some stuff on their schedule that doesn't look as good. I gave it away a little bit. Their win against Florida does not look as impressive last week, because obviously they beat the crap out of Florida, right? Florida's not that good of a team. Again, they struggled against Kent State, who is a terrible football team this year. They struggled against Missouri, who's not that bad. Missouri went in, beat South Carolina pretty handily, but those teams, I think, are SEC overrated. Okay? South Carolina was ranked 25 this week. Ridiculous. They're not a good team. And Missouri's not a very good team either. Does that loss on the road look a little bit better? Yeah, but like, we're talking about potentially the number 1 team. No, you can't go do that. You think Michigan would have gone into Missouri and won by 4 and scored 26 points? Fuck, no, they wouldn't have. So why is Georgia anywhere near there? TCU probably wouldn't have done that, right? Which is why I have them ahead. So again, they have the big blowout win against Oregon, but again, it was at home. It was no preseason.
It was a neutral site game.
It was in Atlanta. Stop it. It's just like LSU. LSU played against Florida State in neutral site. It was in the Mercedes-Benz Superdome, whatever the hell they call it, Caesars Superdome. So yeah, I got Georgia at number 5. At number 4, I have TCU, and the reason I have them ahead of Georgia is because they have the same record, okay, and their wins are just more impressive. Kansas State is a really good team this year. They blew out Oklahoma State the same way Georgia blew out Oregon. Okay. They have a nice road win against Kansas. Their wins against Oklahoma State and Oklahoma, who's going to end up not being that bad of a team this year, are serviceable, solid wins. I'd say the more better comparison would be Oklahoma State and Kansas. Those 2 wins are good, and the Oklahoma win looks a little bit better. Against Texas, Oklahoma didn't have their quarterback. They would not have gotten blown out as bad as they did if they had their quarterback. So Oklahoma's not that bad of a team. They'd still be 5-3, but they're solid. They're not that bad. 2 road wins against SMU and West Virginia, who are solid teams, and then 2 easy wins. But overall, they've done what they needed to do. They've looked more impressive against the opponents they've played, and I think a lot of these opponents are top 25 teams. I don't think Georgia's beating top 25 teams. Again, the only team they've really beaten that's good is Oregon, who is good, but that's it. So I can't put Georgia there. Now, if Georgia goes and beats Tennessee, number one, they're number one. Okay? Most likely. So, but they haven't done anything yet. So Georgia coming up this week can vault potentially to number one. Not this week, though. Number 3 and number 2, again, this could be 3A, or this could be 2A, 2B. It's Ohio State and Michigan. I have Ohio State number 2, Michigan number 3. The reason I have Ohio State number 2 is because they have a road win against Penn State and Michigan has a home win. Their schedules are exactly the same besides that, and there's no reason to go into it that much. These two teams are on a collision motherfucking course to play in the biggest college football game of the year. And so it doesn't matter if one of them moves up to 3. These are the 2 and 3 because number 1's Tennessee. How could you not have Tennessee at number 1? Okay? They have their win against LSU where they blew them out on the road. Looks really good because LSU's a 6-2 team. They murdered Kentucky this Saturday. And they beat Alabama. Like, nobody has a record like this. 8-0. Tennessee should be the favorite against Georgia. It could be slight, but Tennessee going into Georgia potentially could be a favorite. They probably wouldn't, but this game will be tic-tac-toe. It will be back and forth. And again, if Georgia wins, they're number 1, and Tennessee doesn't most likely leave the top 5. I'll just tell you that right now. That's how good this Tennessee team is. If they lose to Georgia, they are still potentially a college football playoff team even next week. Okay? So there you go. I got Georgia, TCU, Michigan, Ohio State, Tennessee. Jared, what do you got?
Well, you redeemed yourself a little by hyping up Tennessee. But the disrespect for Georgia is, oh my! I can't
show it to me, Jared. Show it to me this Saturday. If they lose, I'll be proven right. If they lose, I'll be proven. We should put away.
No. It comes into the way you lose. If it's a close game back and forth.
Okay, but go. I want to see
your by a field goal.
Yeah, I want to see your rankings. Because I want to see where you have Georgia in your ranking.
Okay. All right. So I just mentioned that I switched, mid podcast. I originally had Clemson number 5, but now I'm putting TCU at number 5. Clemson, you said enough. I don't really need to talk about them. I don't think Clemson's matching up with anyone, so I'm just going to number 4. And number 4 is Michigan. They have good wins at Iowa, and then the home win against Penn State. The only game for them that matters is against Ohio State at the end of the year, and it's the same thing for Ohio State. You mentioned it. Their schedules were pretty identical. Ohio State, their first 5 games of the year, they had at home. Michigan, their first 4 games of the year, they had at home. You're getting easy home wins, and you have a couple sprinkled away games during the year. For Michigan, they run the ball very well, right? Their running back, Blake Corum, is a beast. He's small. He's like 5'10", maybe, but he's a freaking bowling ball, and he can run on. So that is their offense. When they run the ball well, Michigan tends to do well. And then defensively, they're ranked 3rd in all of college football, only giving up 11.5 points per game. So they're old school, run the football, play great defense. That has been their success. That's going to be great until you play Ohio State. And Ohio State, I have at number 3. Same thing. Their whole offense is great. They're 4th in the nation with 48.9 points per game. Their best receiver and leading receiver, Smith and Jigba, has been injured for like half the season. So they haven't even, if they can get him back full strength, that's going to be even a bigger boost. And like I mentioned earlier, I think CJ Stroud is 1A, 1B, whatever you want to call it, with him and Bryce Young. So I think CJ Stroud should be the number 1 pick in this year's draft, quarterback wise. And I think he is one of the reasons why Ohio State is so good. But it's going to be Ohio State, Michigan at the end of the year. One of those teams is going to win and catapult themselves. The other team probably gets knocked out of the college football playoff. Georgia is number 2. Georgia is the number 2 team in the country. What has Ohio State and Michigan's record or schedule done to say that they should be ahead of Georgia? Because to me, Georgia plays in the SEC. Yes, Georgia has had closer games, but when I look at Ohio State's schedule and I look at Michigan's schedule, none of that really scares me. Like, yeah, I will take Georgia's schedule and the way that they have played so far over Ohio State and Michigan. And I am considering, as long as Oregon continues to win, that only makes Georgia's win look better at the beginning of the year, albeit at the Atlanta Falcons home stadium in Georgia. So yes, it definitely was a home game. It was a good win against Florida. Florida's not as good of a team anymore, but it's still a good win against a major rival, right? That's a major rivalry. Maybe not Ohio State, Michigan, but it's up there as a big rivalry. They're the defending champs. They deserve respect. And Georgia's defense is second in the nation, only giving up 10.5 points a game. So Georgia is for real. Yeah, they have like hiccups, but if Ohio State and Michigan played in the SEC, I would bet that they would probably have some more hiccups as well. So I put Georgia at number 2 because when I look at Michigan and Ohio State's schedule, none of that. Like, if you want to look at schedules, I'm going to go to TCU and say TCU has had a better schedule because they've beaten 4 or 5 ranked teams in a row. But that's why I have Georgia at number 2. And we will see when Georgia plays Tennessee how that shakes out. Tennessee's the number 1 team. You're absolutely right. Their schedule has been unreal. 5 wins against top 25 opponents. Absolutely killed Kentucky, and then they whooped on LSU as well, beating Alabama. I don't care if it was by 1 point, 3 point, whatever. When you beat the current number 1 team and you take down Nick Saban and Bryce Young, that's something to freaking celebrate. Their offense is dynamic, 2nd in the nation in passing yards, 3rd in the nation in points per game. And then Hendon Hooker and Jalen Hyatt, I think right now that's the best. They're playing the best quarterback wide receiver combo. They may not be the best. I think you can maybe argue CJ Stroud and Jigba and some other players. But right now, the way that they're playing, Hendon Hooker and Jalen Hyatt are playing the best quarterback wide receiver combo. So yeah, Tennessee is easily the number 1 team, and we haven't said that in a long time, but they deserve it.
And Jared, it's something funny to say about what you just said right there. You said Jalen Hyatt, Hendon Hooker, number 1 quarterback wide receiver duo. Jalen Hyatt isn't even the best wide receiver on that team.
I know.
Cedric Tillman.
That's the crazy part.
Oh my goodness, this team is that. That's why. No, Jared, let's get into this to end the podcast, right? So there's a lot of interesting things that can happen. We've laid it out. Tennessee plays Georgia this weekend. Right. 1 versus 2, 1 versus 3, 4, 5, whatever you have. It doesn't matter. The winner of this game will essentially indoctrinate themselves into the college football playoff, realistically, right? As long as they don't lose another game, okay? Michigan, Ohio State, they'll play. They'll go 11-0. Interesting thing with Ohio State and Michigan, they won't lose. But like, what's cool is some of their toughest games are actually the week before Ohio State, Michigan. Ohio State plays Maryland, who is 6-2 right now. Tua Tagovailoa is their quarterback. They're 1 play away, a 1 2-point conversion away, and a bad penalty call in the end zone of being 7-1. So not an easy team at all. And then Illinois plays Michigan the week before. And Illinois currently is ranked in the top 15 in a lot of people's rankings. They're 7-1. They played nobody, so they ain't even in my top 16 teams. But it'll be interesting. Like, even that week before, right? You never know, right? But if those teams aren't impressive the week before, maybe you see a Georgia jump back up if they lose to Tennessee, or Tennessee jump back up, or Alabama. Alabama plays LSU and Ole Miss still. Okay. They will move up the rankings. Here's the thing, Jared, you probably can agree with me on this. It looks like the ACC ain't getting a team in, because unless certain teams lose in the SEC, or the Big 12, or TCU loses, or UCLA and UCLA lose, or USC and UCLA end up with 2 losses on their tail. Like, I think all of these teams are going to skip Clemson. I don't think the ACC will have a top 17 probably at the end of the season. So, and that will hurt their schedule too. The other interesting thing to look at is with the SEC, they still do divisions. It's dumb. It's stupid. Georgia and Tennessee are in the same division. So the winner of this weekend's game is going to the SEC championship game. Okay? Which means they'll have an extra game. The loser will be 11-1. So it'll be very interesting to see how the committee goes. Because if Alabama beats LSU and they beat Ole Miss, they'll beat their last 2 opponents. 11-1, only lost to the number 1 team in the nation. And then you go in and you beat Georgia or you beat Tennessee. I mean, what do you do then? What do you do? What do you do, right? If they redeem their loss against Tennessee, you got to put Alabama in. If they beat Georgia, 3-1 loss team, Georgia beat Tennessee, they all beat each other. What the fuck? Right?
Yeah, no,
It's gonna be, and then you mentioned, you make a good point. Ohio State Michigan schedule sucks, and their Big Ten championship game won't matter. They'll play Illinois.
Yeah, no, they're going to play Illinois, and they're going to be. I'm sorry, I got sidetracked. There's a TV that is in front of me somewhat, and they just said that 4 Michigan State players just got suspended for literally beating the crap out of a Michigan player after the game this past Saturday in the tunnel. And so I don't know if you saw that.
No, and we could give some comments on that too.
That was crazy. Sorry, I was listening to what you were saying, and I should have chimed in earlier.
You're all good.
I just saw that those 4 players got suspended, and I'm looking at he got rocked, man. He was literally it was like a mosh pit, and he was the target.
Well, essentially what happened was a Michigan player, I don't know exactly who it is, they share the same tunnel. The teams had to go through the same tunnel. Okay, similar to Bills and Packers. And that's why we saw Jair Alexander and Stephon Diggs didn't do it before Sunday's game. Fix it. All right, guys. But a Michigan player went in talking shit, over celebrating, all this stuff. He goes in and he gets assaulted by multiple Michigan State players. We had old Myles Garrett, helmets being thrown. No excuse, in my opinion, no matter what somebody said. Okay? And even if a guy touched the guy's face or something, yeah, you can't swing a helmet. Can't swing a helmet. I'm sorry. And those guys should never be able to play college football again. Simple as that. At least this year. And a lot of the players are lawyering up. That's what I heard. Not much. Go ahead.
It was 4 defensive players that just showed it. A defensive lineman, a safety, a cornerback, and a linebacker, I think. And they're all different. One was a freshman, I think 2 sophomore and 1 juniors. But interesting that it's 4 defensive players. Not that Michigan was really going anywhere anyway, but yeah, that is holy shit. That guy got rocked, man. And yeah, here's the thing. I get it. It's the big house. It's tradition. It's all this shit. But why do we still have teams going through the same tunnel? Number one, why does one team, if it's the home team, then you should get to go in first? And you make sure that everyone is fucking cleared and in the locker room, and then you let the away team go, or vice versa. I don't know. I don't care. But the fact that at the collegiate level, no less, we're seeing players that obviously are amped up, hyped up. The game just ended, right? Their adrenaline's still going, and dudes are going into the same tunnel. It's honestly.
It's dumb.
These are still teenagers and early adults. They're not in the NFL yet. They're not making a shit ton of money, right? We expect more from professionals. Not that we don't expect a lot from these college athletes, because they're still adults as well. But still, it's absolutely fucking stupid that there wasn't enough security around there and enough personnel to be okay, one team has fully gone in, now the other team can go. How that gets mixed up, it's fucking stupid. I'm not taking away any fucking blame to these Michigan State players. You're right. I hope these guys should be suspended, and they shouldn't be allowed to suit up at all, at minimum for the rest of this year. Their college careers are probably done. They should be. But I think it's just crazy that, we have these, let's go through the same tunnel and let's let both teams just run through. Yeah. Your fucking adrenaline's running high. It's a rivalry game. Even though Michigan is clearly the better team, it's still Michigan State. What are we doing? So I think we also need to check the security and check how protocol is done.
Yeah, check out. I don't know exactly what video you're talking about, but there's a video we posted on our Cover 2 podcast page, our Twitter page, that shows a video, I believe, from an ESPN feed of kind of what happened. So go check that out. But yeah, Jared, terrible incident. Michigan State is sorry this year. They suck, and they felt bad that they didn't score a touchdown against Michigan. It just, again, and rivalry games, Jared, we've said, a lot of times rivalry games end up being a little closer. It doesn't matter that Michigan only beat Michigan State by 20. It's fine. You know what I'm saying? It happens.
So let's wrap the show up with this. And this is something that I wanted to say. College football is better when rivalries are high and when rivalries include ranked teams. We are potentially having, now I don't want to say that, who knows, Georgia and Tennessee may be a rivalry, but it's not Ohio State, Michigan. But still, we have Tennessee and Georgia matching up this week. In a couple of weeks, we're going to have Ohio State and Michigan. And for all intents and purposes, they're both going to be undefeated and probably in the top 4. We have LSU and Alabama coming up, right? And obviously that's one of the biggest rivalries ever. And then we have USC and UCLA that are both good, both ranked for the first time in forever. So you have the biggest rivalries in all of college football: USC, UCLA, Ohio State, Michigan, LSU, Alabama, all like ranked and like meaning something. That is crazy because I don't remember the last time that we had all those rivalries ranked and real meaningful games. There's still rivalries when they're not ranked, but it's not the same, right? When there's not a whole lot on the line, it's kind of like, all right, whatever. But there's a shit ton on the line for all of those teams that I just mentioned. And I think that's really cool. So it'd be really cool if they all played on the same weekend. I don't really know if they do or not. I'm assuming it's not. But because I know that USC plays Notre Dame after UCLA.
Yeah. No, it's annoying too because I'm going to be at Harvard Yale, and so hopefully they move that start time back for the UCLA USC game because I know the Harvard Yale game will probably start at 9 Eastern or at 12 Eastern time, which helps. But still, it's a little annoying that they're playing because Notre Dame is sorry this year too. They ain't that good. So
yeah. But no, I had to throw it out there. That's really cool. That we've got the rivalries that are legitimate this year, and they're going to mean something. So
So UCLA and USC play on their own week. They do not play on Michigan State weekend.
Okay.
But as far as the Pac-12 goes, think about this, Jerry. So this is the November 19th Saturday. UCLA USC. It's in the Rose Bowl, by the way, and also Oregon Utah, same weekend. So for the Pac-12, Judgment Day.
That's huge.
Right? If all those teams stay undefeated, and then Oregon, throw it out there. Oregon plays Oregon State this year. That's going to be a good matchup. Oregon State's a good team this year. LSU, Alabama, this weekend, Saturday, that's a rivalry. Top 15 teams. 2 top 15. Jerry, I have LSU as number 11. LSU's right outside and the reason I have that is because Ole Miss lost to them. Can't put LSU below them. I don't care if they have 2 losses. Right?
Okay.
So and LSU here, let me explain that too really quickly. LSU, their one loss is to Tennessee, really bad loss, but Tennessee's number 1, and their other loss is Florida State because Florida State blocked an extra point at the end of the game. So LSU's an extra point away essentially from winning that game, and they're really they're the best 6-2 team because they could be 7-1. So Jared, I mean, so much to look at. Like I said, so much still to come. Tennessee, Georgia this weekend. Alabama, LSU. Will Alabama be eliminated from college football playoff contention this weekend? Possibly. Will Tennessee, Georgia fall out of Jared and I's top 5 if they lose? One of them for sure will if they lose. The other one maybe not. And Ohio State and Michigan. Could maybe the loser of the Michigan-Ohio State game not make it to the the college football? So much. It's such a good college football year, Jared. It's such a good college football year. TCU. They go undefeated. Oh, you can't keep them out. USC, UCLA. One of them goes 12-1, avenges one of their losses. Maybe they're still in there. So much still to go. But this was our college football rankings this week. Jared, let's see how close we are. I think we're going to be pretty close to the actual college football rankings. It will be interesting to see how far off the AP poll and college football rankings committee has it. Maybe they agree with me that Georgia's the number 5 or 4 team. Or, Jared, maybe they agree with you. Maybe they have Georgia at number 1 or number 2, right? Maybe Clemson's moved down further. Maybe Alabama's moved down further like I have them. Or maybe Alabama's in the top 5. We'll have to see. But tell us who you think the better top 10 is. The college football playoffs top 10, Jared Smith's top 10, or my top 10. For this podcast, though, we are done. I am Nick Nenad.
I'm Jared Smith.
And we'll see you next week.
Don't forget.